first source is called The Problem of Overpopulation, Pro-Environmental Concerns and Behavior Predict Reproductive Attitudes from the Journal of Ecopsychology. There are three primary authors: Adam C. Davis from the University of Ottawa in the Department of Education, Stephen Arnaki from Nipissing University in the Department of Psychology, and Marilla Strunk from Lakehead University, also in the Department of Psychology. This source was built around a study of about 200 undergraduate students in Canada, and essentially it was to find whether or not environmental concern helps predict if students have pro-reproductive or basically anti-reproductive attitudes. Their results were statistically significant, and they found that those who were more environmentally conscious had greater negative pro-reproductive attitudes, while those who were less environmentally conscious had more positive pro-reproductive attitudes. So those who were environmentally conscious wanted less children, while those who weren't wanted more. The authors then stated that these behaviors really lie within the concern that a growing human population would deplete natural resources that we as human beings depend on for survival. However, due to the study being conducted in Canada, having a child is a much higher impact action than if, say, we were taking this study in a developing country where the population is actually growing at a much faster rate. My second source is an article called The Book That Incited a Worldwide Fear of Overpopulation. It was published in Smithsonian Magazine on January 1st, 2018, and was written by Charles C. Mann, a prominent American journalist. He's had his works published in the New York Times, Washington Post, and Science. Mann's article was written specifically about The Population Bomb, an immensely popular book that was written by Paul Ehrlich, an influential environmental biologist in the 1970s, and its continual influence on the scientific community and society's viewpoint of overpopulation. There's a lot of jabs at his book, especially within this article, specifically pointing out the hypocritical nature of it, where Paul Ehrlich actually visits Eastern communities and points out their overpopulation just based on their bazaars or based on their traffic, when in fact the cities that he was visiting had smaller populations than those in the West. That does help bring forward the argument against the racial connotations of environmental concern about overpopulation. Essentially, the publishing of the book sparked a fear worldwide about overpopulation. Obviously, in the title, he states that. And there was actually legislation passed all over the East in developing communities with high birth rates, where they were governmentally mandating birth control. They were dropping birth control from helicopters. They were coercing men and women both into sterilization. They were forcing sterilization, and they were even withholding food, electricity, and schooling from children whose parents refused to be sterilized. My next source is an article called "I'm an Environmental Journalist, but I never write about population. Here's why." It was published on September 26, 2017 in Vox by the author David Roberts, who is the founder of Volt's environmental newsletter, and he writes for Vox as well as Grist, which is an environmental news publication. Roberts focuses on breaking down the popular arguments for and against population in environmental science. He starts out with the actual formula for environmental impact, which is population times affluence times technology. Population's right there in the formula, so he says yes, population does indeed have an impact on the environment. He sheds light on the racist ideas that helped birth the production of the belief that overpopulation would be our downfall, and brings up the example of the Sierra Club in the early 2000s, who had an extremely strong anti-immigration stance in the United States in particular, and he points out that the actual best way to stop overpopulation is indeed to empower women and to educate women in developing countries to have better access to family planning and to birth control, so that they can stop having as many children as they are. But he does stress that if we are worried about emissions and carbon footprint, we should be looking out west, because we are the people who produce the most waste and the people who produce the most pollution. So he does stress both of those ideas, and that he believes that they should be working in tandem as opposed to working in opposition to one another. My fourth article is called Population and Environment in the Annual Review of Environment and Resources. There are 4 authors, the first of which being Alex de Cherbanin from the Center for International Earth Science Information Network at Columbia University. There's David Carr from the University of California, Santa Barbara in the Geography Department. Susan Castle, who was in the Center for Studies in Demography and Ecology in the University of Washington, and Laiwen Zhang from the Watson Institute for International Studies at Brown University. Population and Environment focuses on population dynamics through the lens of demography and the social sciences. They've looked at the global trends in consumption and population, and they've basically concluded that the most agreed upon theory is the mediating variable theory of population. Now, the mediating variable theory essentially takes into account culture, technology, institutions, and consumption into the environmental impact of each individual population. Essentially, they have moved on from using the individual as the unit of study into using the household. So each household in each different culture is the most accurate unit of measurement for the environmental impact of somebody within a country.